if the Ukrainians can hold some territory for a period of time in Kursk, most likely, they've already advanced to 30 kilometers into Kursk, maybe some kind of a land swap deal, Kursk for Kharkiv, could be possible.
Belgorod has become the second Russian region to issue evacuation orders due to Ukraine's cross-border incursions. According to officials, 11,000 people have left the region, with an official saying that the entire region is under a missile alert amid the threat from Ukrainian troops. On breakfast this morning, the Ukrainian MP, Alexei Goncharenko, gave Asma and Stig his message for Russian leaders.
So finally, after 900 days of full-scale invasion, you recognize that international borders matter. We also think so. So leave Ukraine and the war is finished. It's very easy. So we have all the right to protect ourselves with all the means we have and wherever we need to do it, because it was not us who started this war.
Joining us now is Samuel Ramani, who is the Associate Fellow at RUSI and author of Putin's War in Ukraine. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. What do you believe is the purpose of this Ukrainian action?
Well, I think it's got several different purposes. I mean, the first is, as Alexei Goncharenko was just alluding to, basically making the Russians feel that their violations of Ukrainian sovereignty and launching this war actually affects them. Because outside of some minority regions like Buryatia and Dagestan, there have been many parts of Russia that just have been largely carrying on unaffected by this war. Secondly, it's about military tactics. It's about diverting Russian forces from Donetsk, where they're continuing to launch offensive operations, and making them have to defend the homeland. And thirdly, if the Ukrainians can hold some territory for a period of time in Kursk, most likely, they've already advanced to 30 kilometers into Kursk, maybe some kind of a land swap deal, Kursk for Kharkiv, could be possible.
Some are saying that, China included, that this is fueling the flame. And also we have the Stop the War Coalition in the UK accusing Ukraine now of being the aggressors. Could this be a disaster for them in terms of international opinion?
Well, I don't think it's going to necessarily change international opinion. The most remarkable thing about this Russian invasion of Ukraine is that international opinion has been largely static. Basically, the countries that decided to support or remain neutral in the war have remained neutral, and those that condemned the war initially have been condemned. If you look at the first two votes, a year apart in the UNGA, 141 countries voted to condemn the war the first time, 140 countries voted the second time. So I think that people like the Stop the War Coalition in China were already expressing concern that the West's supply of arms to Ukraine was escalating the conflict. So they would definitely be also critical of Ukraine marching into Russian territory. So I don't think it's going to change things very much. Ukraine's detractors will just get more vocal, and Ukraine's supporters will probably double down.
You say that one of Ukraine's intention may be to hold territory for an eventual swap. But do you think militarily this can be sustained by the Ukrainian side?
I think that it's going to be pretty tough to sustain that militarily. I think that even John Kirby's comments from the White House were making a similar kind of allusion. I don't think it's about long-term occupation of territory. Nobody in Ukraine is talking about holding Kursk or Belgorod or any of these regions for a long time. And I don't think it's necessarily going to carry forward on to eventual final settlement negotiations. But as there have been prisoner exchanges and as there have been other forms of dialogue on the grain deal and other topics, dialogue between the Ukrainians and the Russians, mediated by third parties, has been an enduring feature of this war. So it's very possible that if the Ukrainians hold on to Kursk for long enough, and the Russians are already failing in Kharkiv, they've lost so many equipment and people in Vovchansk, they might decide, okay, we'll cut our losses, we'll leave Kharkiv if Ukraine can return to the borders. And that might be something that the Ukrainians would be keen to accept.
Если мы брали бы 510 прицел, а мы тут ляпали бы. командир злий сьогодні. Життя таке бентежне. Хоч менше на 50. А було нас. Постріл! Постріл!
And let's turn our attention to the Middle East for a moment. It does seem to be a build-up. The US has deployed a guided missile submarine to the region, and there is an expectation, perhaps, that Iran may retaliate after the apparent assassination in Tehran of Hamas's top political leader. Do you feel that there is now going to be further military action in the region?
Well, I think that there's probably going to be definitely further military action in the region. I think if you looked at the statement that was coming from Tehran earlier today, is that we have a right to defend ourselves against Israeli attacks, and we have a right to respond to Israeli attacks with an appropriate deterrent against future ones. So clearly, the Iranians are determined to not just retaliate against what's happened with the Israelis striking their infrastructure in Syria, killing a senior Hezbollah commander as well as Haniyeh inside Tehran, but also to try to deter Israel from carrying out similar such actions in the future. The big question is, what will that retaliation actually look like? Everybody's paying attention to the border with Lebanon, but I don't know whether Hezbollah really wants to launch a major war. Also, we're seeing some activities from the Houthis coming over. So I think that there'll probably be a mixed Houthi attack on Israel and Israeli port infrastructure in Eilat, maybe another attempted attack on Tel Aviv, possibly launched in the Mediterranean instead of the Red Sea to shock the Israelis, as well as some cross-border attacks at the Lebanese border. It'll be more severe than what we saw probably back in the spring, back in April, but probably not enough to launch a full-scale, long-term regional war of the kind that Israel's fighting in Gaza in either Lebanon or Yemen.
And presumably, as we're seeing in the past and currently at sea, France and the UK would be involved in this to an extent.
Well, they probably would be involved in this to an extent. We saw with the Houthi strikes, for example, the British playing some kind of a supplementary role, fighting against the Houthis with the Americans. And also, France has been taking a bit of a cautious approach to this. The French have been probably the leading Western voice in some respects, calling for a de-escalation of the Lebanese front. But if push comes to shove, it's hard to see them staying out of this entirely. I think the British involvement alongside the Americans is a bit more likely than the French, but the French will probably be dragged in too.
Samuel Ramani of the Royal United Services Institute, thank you very much indeed.